Dolores lost her parents at a very young age. They died in a car accident when she was only 2 years old. She was adopted by her maternal aunt Jimena, her mother's older sister. Truth be told, Jimena didn't hold much affection for Elena, Dolores' mother. The younger sister was beautiful and refined, always attracting many admirers. One day, at a cafe, she met a tall and handsome man named Victor. He was a traveler. Victor invited her to see a new movie about a round-the-world journey in a hot air balloon. The young couple had a great time, and the film made a big impression on them. Victor turned out to be a sweet and interesting conversationalist. He knows so much, has been to so many places. Elena would excitedly tell Jimena about her new acquaintance. "He's not right for you," practical Jimena would retort. "Just a careless idler. He'll dazzle you and then leave you." However, Elena didn't listen to her sister. She continued seeing Victor. The young couple fell in love and got married just 3 months later. Jimena considered this move more than frivolous and didn't approve of her sister's marriage. Victor couldn't stay still and took his wife everywhere with him. They traveled all over the country and occasionally abroad. Jimena found this lifestyle strange. She was accustomed to staying in one place, taking care of the home and garden, and raising children. When Dolores was born, Jimena thought everything would change, but the girl's parents continued to travel, leaving her with a nanny. When the car accident happened, Jimena had no choice but to take the girl in. She already had 4 sons of her own. Dolores became the 5th child in the family. Of course, Jimena, who had the weight of the whole household on her shoulders, couldn't spare much time for the girl. And she didn't really want to. "We have enough other problems," Jimena would grumble. "She should be grateful we took her in and didn't send her to an orphanage." Jimena's sons didn't take kindly to Dolores' arrival. They didn't want to share their toys or let her join their games. The older cousins teased her, calling her a poor orphan. The girl cried constantly. She missed her parents terribly. Every morning, Dolores would climb onto the windowsill in the living room, clutching the soft teddy bear her deceased parents had given her, and hide behind the thick curtains, staring out the window in complete loneliness. Fortunately, soon another significant event occurred in the family of Xavier, which changed little Dolores' life for the better. The elderly father moved in with his daughter. Until then, Grandpa Aurelio had lived in the village, but he found it increasingly difficult to manage on his own. So Jimena decided to bring him to live with them. Grandpa Aurelio was housed in a separate wing of the house, accessible through the garden. Jimena made sure that her father had access to the kitchen and 2 rooms, one for sleeping and one for his workshop. Grandpa Aurelio had been a farmer all his life, but in his spare time, he enjoyed creating elegant wooden and plaster figurines. He still pursued his favorite pastime, which he poured his soul into. After the deaths of Jimena's and Elena's mother, creativity became the old man's only solace. With the arrival of Grandpa Aurelio in Dolores' life, a bright ray of light shone. From their very first meeting, the girl felt a deep trust towards the old man. All the children loved him for his kindness and cheerful disposition. Upon seeing Dolores for the first time, Grandpa Aurelio beckoned her over and asked her to extend her hand. The girl obeyed and was delighted to find a small plaster kitten in her hand. "How adorable," she exclaimed, quickly hiding the gift in her pocket, fearing that her cousins would take it away. Grandpa Aurelio frowned, noticing the girl's fear. He understood that the older children were mistreating her. "This girl needs love and care," he decided to himself. Grandpa Aurelio allowed Dolores to come to his workshop anytime she wanted. "I'll always be glad to see you," the old man said with a kind smile. And Dolores began to visit her grandfather every day. Grandpa Aurelio read her books, took her for walks in the park, and allowed her to help him with his figurines. The girl learned to work with plaster, and the time spent in Grandpa Aurelio's workshop became one of the happiest memories of her childhood. As Dolores grew older, her relationship with the Xavier family worsened. Her cousins continued to be rude to her, disregarding her entirely. Jimena nitpicked at Dolores over every little thing, even her choice of clothes. Once, when Dolores was 14, she wanted to rearrange her room, but Jimena wouldn't allow it. "As long as you live under this roof, I decide how the furniture is arranged," she said. Dolores was on the verge of tears from the insult. "But Aunt, it's my room, and I'm the only one living in it." Jimena pursed her lips. "There's nothing here that belongs to you, remember that," she coldly replied. The cousins, sitting at the kitchen table drinking cocoa, giggled. "Because you're a poor orphan," one of them said. "Don't forget that," added another. Instead of scolding the children, Jimena remained silent. Dolores rushed out of the kitchen, barely holding back her tears. She knew the only place where she would be understood was her grandfather Aurelio's workshop. Dolores rushed into the spacious room, illuminated by bright sunlight, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What happened, dear?" Grandpa Aurelio asked, alarmed. Dolores sat on the edge of a chair, buried her face in her hands, and sobbed aloud. "They hate me, Grandpa. Maybe I'd be better off living in an orphanage than enduring this. I can't take it anymore." Grandpa Aurelio pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "If you were in an orphanage right now, who would help me make sculptures?" he asked tenderly. Dolores wiped her tears. "You're right, Grandpa," she smiled. They got to work. When Dolores started helping the old man, his sculptures became even more graceful and unusual. She put her heart, soul, and imagination into her work. Grandpa Aurelio often said that the girl had a natural talent for noticing and creating beauty. "You have an innate gift for noticing and creating beauty," the old man often said. "When you grow up, you could become a famous artist." But Dolores just laughed shyly in response. "Oh no, Grandpa. It's all your magical hands. They create all the beauty. I'm just your helper." However, deep down, Dolores was terribly proud that Grandpa Aurelio praised her. One day, the girl suggested to the old man that they paint some of the sculptures with colors. Grandpa Aurelio thought it was a great idea. Together they went to the city and bought everything they needed for their creativity: acrylic paints, brushes, a palette. As soon as they returned, the girl got to work. The old man and Dolores worked in the workshop until late in the evening, and both were pleased with the work they had done. The plaster figurines, made by Grandpa and painted by his granddaughter, took on a whole new life. "Grandpa, what if we sell them at the school fair?" Grandpa Aurelio looked thoughtfully at Dolores. "I've never sold my work before." "But why not?" he finally smiled. Dolores clapped her hands and hugged her grandfather. Their figurines sold like hotcakes and became a real hit. Dolores was happy, and Grandpa Aurelio rejoiced as he looked at her. Years passed, and it was time for Dolores to choose what to do after school. "I really want to continue studying," Dolores confessed. "You should study to become an artist," her grandfather said. Dolores looked at him with doubt. "Are you sure? If aunt and cousins find out, they will laugh at my intention immediately. Poor orphan wants to become an artist." "What a joke," the girl said bitterly. But Grandpa Aurelio shook his head. "You need to learn to feel your worth regardless of the opinions and actions of others," he wisely said. "Do what your heart whispers. It never deceives." Dolores nodded. "Okay, Grandpa, I'll try," she promised. And Dolores began to spend all her time studying. Finally, the time came to take exams. Dolores was very nervous, but Grandpa Aurelio supported her in everything. He suggested taking pictures of their joint works and showing them to the teachers. "I'm sure it will be a big plus for your exam results," the old man said decisively. Dolores nodded in agreement. A month later, Dolores received a letter from the university. It said that she was accepted to the first year of the art faculty, and it was also noted that all the members of the commission really liked her works. "Grandpa, I got in," exclaimed Dolores, running into the workshop. Grandpa Aurelio was very pleased. "We must celebrate this," he said. "Get ready, we're going to a restaurant." Dolores couldn't believe her ears. "But it's very expensive." Grandpa smiled. but the occasion is worth it. Besides, I've been wanting to see you in a beautiful dress for a long time." Dolores thought for a moment. "But, Grandpa, I don't have any beautiful dresses," she admitted honestly. "Is Jimena so stingy that she didn't buy you a single outfit for special occasions?" The old man frowned. "All the money goes to the boys," Dolores shrugged. Grandpa Aurelio paused for a moment, then his wrinkled face lit up. "Then, we'll stop by some fashionable store before the restaurant," he announced. No objections accepted. Dolores had to agree, and she didn't regret it. For the first time, she was allowed to choose a dress for herself. Dolores immediately saw it, pale pink, with lantern sleeves and a fluffy flowing skirt. Grandpa Aurelio was delighted when he saw his granddaughter in her new outfit. "You look magnificent," he sincerely said. "You are such a beauty. All the university boys will be chasing after you, but don't let them get too close. You need to study, and you can get married later." Dolores nodded with a laugh. "Okay, Grandpa." They spent a wonderful evening together. Everything seemed magical to Dolores. She knew that this restaurant, her dress, and Grandpa Aurelio's slightly blushing kind face would remain in her memory forever. When the Xavier family learned that Dolores had been accepted to the university, they couldn't believe what they heard. "How dare you hide everything from me?" Jimena was angry. "Ungrateful girl." Dolores blushed. "Aunt, I didn't mean to hide anything from you. I just didn't know if it would work out or not, and I didn't want to say anything prematurely." But Jimena was relentless. "Since you've been accepted to university, you're considered an adult and an independent person. You have nothing more to do in our house." Dolores couldn't believe her ears. "You're kicking me out?" Jimena crossed her arms over her chest and gave the girl a hostile look. "The university should provide dormitory housing. You can move there. It's time for you to take care of yourself. And don't you dare complain to Grandpa Aurelio. Tell him you decided to move out yourself. He's too old to worry about you." With these words, Jimena left the room with a stony face. Dolores thought that her aunt was right. There was no need to involve Grandpa. Maybe her move would be the best solution for everyone. After all, she could always come to visit her beloved grandfather and continue their joint work. Surely, no one would dare to forbid her that. The next day, Dolores went to the university and learned about the dormitory. She was told that they could provide her with a place in one of the girls' rooms. Dolores went home and, wasting no time, began to pack her things. It turned out she had very few of them. She carefully packed the pink dress that Grandpa Aurelio had given her, folded jeans, t-shirts, and hoodies, a few books, and a soft plush teddy bear that her parents had bought her a long time ago. Then, together with her bag, Dolores went to her Grandpa Aurelio's workshop. Seeing her with her belongings, he was very surprised. Dolores explained that she had been given a place in the student dormitory, and she decided that living there would be more convenient for her. The dormitory is only a 5-minute walk from the main campus. I'll be very comfortable there. Besides, I'll make friends with other girls, and I'll finally have friends," Dolores said. Grandpa Aurelio smiled. "Then, of course, it's the best decision. But I will miss you terribly, my dear granddaughter." Dolores noticed tears in the old man's eyes and hugged him tightly. "I'll visit you often. And we'll continue working on new sculptures and figurines," she reassured him. "Absolutely." Grandpa Aurelio nodded happily. That night, Dolores slept on the couch in her grandpa's workshop. It was her last night in the Xavier family's house. The next morning, she moved into the dormitory and met her roommates. They all turned out to be first-year students, just like her. Dolores found the girls to be sweet, friendly, and very talkative. "It seems I already like my new student life," she thought. One of the girls was new to the city and wanted to explore. Dolores volunteered to accompany her. They wandered around the city center, ate ice cream, enjoyed each other's company, and the fresh air. Dolores's new friend was named Elena, like her mom, and she considered it a good sign. Perhaps my mom is sending her regards from heaven, she thought. The idea brought a tear to her eye. The next day, she went to see Grandpa Aurelio and told him about her new friends. He was delighted that his granddaughter had befriended her roommates. "I hope your friendship will be strong and warm," Grandpa said, and after a moment of silence, added, "Cherish kindred spirits, they are not so common in life." Dolores nodded gratefully. They worked until late in the evening, and then she left for the dormitory by taxi. A week later, classes began, and Dolores had almost no time to visit Grandpa Aurelio's workshop. She diligently attended classes, spent long hours in the library, and sometimes didn't return to her room until close to midnight. Her favorite teacher was Senior Mateo Amato. He had recently graduated from university and was very talented and young. His pleasant voice, kind brown eyes, and shoulder-length curly black hair captivated all the girls. Mateo wore light shirts to class, with sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and simple but stylish jeans. Dolores immediately noticed that many girls looked at him with admiration, and she caught herself liking him too. However, she quickly pushed that thought away. Mateo was a teacher, and she was his student. She shouldn't think of him any differently. Senior Amato taught sculpture, and one day after class, he unexpectedly asked Dolores to stay a little longer. "I would like to ask you something, Señorita," he said in his charming voice. Surprised, Dolores nodded and sat back at her desk. "The teachers who were on the admissions committee told me that you showed them photos of your work. They were impressed by their delicacy and grace. I would like to see something from your creations with my own eyes." Dolores was pleased that their works with her grandfather had caused such a resonance. "We created these sculptures and figurines together with my grandpa. I'll go to him today and ask for permission," she said. Mateo nodded and smiled at her with such a charming smile that Dolores's heart skipped a beat. She smiled back and hurried out of the classroom. The only thing I needed was to fall in love with him, Dolores thought to herself. After having lunch at a cafe, she didn't go home but went straight to Grandpa Aurelio's workshop to visit him, help him, and tell him about Senior Amato's request. Grandpa Aurelio greeted her with a joyful smile. It was clear he missed his granddaughter very much. Dolores sadly noted that during the time they hadn't seen each other, Grandpa Aurelio had aged a lot. She tried to push away sad thoughts and began telling the old man about her studies, how much she liked the lessons, how big the university library was, and how great it was to walk in the park during breaks between classes. Then she told him about Senior Mateo Amato and his request. Grandpa Aurelio was pleasantly surprised. "If your teacher wants to see our works, I invite him here. Come together," he said. Dolores nodded and said she would pass the sculptor's invitation to the old man. Then they got to work, and Dolores left late at night. She really didn't want to part with Grandpa Aurelio, and she promised to call him tomorrow. The next day, Dolores arranged with Senor Amato that they would go to Grandfather Aurelio's on Friday after classes. Then she called the old man to warn him. He was delighted with the news and said he would prepare a treat. Dolores got worried because Grandfather Aurelio was coughing heavily on the phone. "Are you catching a cold?" she asked. "A little," croaked the old man. "Let's bring drinks and something tasty with us." "You shouldn't strain yourself, Grandpa." Only one day remained until Friday, and Dolores eagerly awaited the meeting with Grandfather Aurelio. She was very concerned about his health. Finally, classes ended, and Senor Amato met the girl in the hall. "My car is in the parking lot. Can we stop by the supermarket on the way? I would like to buy groceries for Grandfather Aurelio, as well as drinks and pastries, so we can all spend some time together." Mateo smiled and nodded. "Of course, no problem," he replied, taking the girl by the arm. And they walked towards the exit, accompanied by the surprised, curious, and envious looks of other students. "What does he see in her?" Dolores heard the voice of a tall blonde girl who was in her second year. It seemed that Mateo heard it too. "Pay no attention to what others say," he whispered, feeling that Dolores was very tense. No one should have a say in your life. The girl nodded. They went out, and Amato brought Dolores to the parking lot. He stopped in front of a large silver Jeep. Many people ask, how come an ordinary university teacher has such an expensive car? Mateo smiled. Dolores modestly remained silent, but this question really interested her. It's a gift from sponsors, continued the sculptor, opening the door for the girl. They really like my work. Last year, I participated in an international exhibition in Italy. This time, Dolores couldn't help but let out an admiring exclamation. Oh, that's a significant achievement, exclaimed the girl, sitting in the passenger seat. It sure is, Mateo smiled, getting behind the wheel. Italy is rightfully considered the capital of the arts. Dolores sighed. I wish I could participate in an exhibition someday, she said dreamily. I'm sure you have it all ahead of you, Senor Amato replied seriously. They drove through the city streets, and Dolores liked how smoothly the car moved. Finally, Mateo stopped at a huge supermarket and parked the Jeep. He swiftly got out of the car and managed to open the door for Dolores before she could unbuckle her seatbelt. Thank you, she said with a shy smile. They took a trolley and filled it with various groceries, drinks, and sweets. To Dolores' surprise, Mateo didn't let her pay for the purchases. He packed everything into bags and carried them to the parking lot. Dolores followed him empty-handed. She appreciated the gesture from her teacher, but at the same time, she felt awkward. Finally, they arrived at the Xavier family's house and parked nearby. Mateo took the bags with groceries, while Dolores showed the way. Grandfather Aurelio took a long time to open the door. Did he forget about the meeting and go somewhere? Dolores worried. But then the door opened, and the pale grandfather appeared on the threshold. Dolores, my dear. I'm sorry for not opening the door earlier. I haven't been feeling well since the morning, took a short nap, and apparently fell asleep deeply. Grandfather indeed looked unwell. Dolores was very scared for him but tried to keep herself together. Grandfather Aurelio stepped aside to let the guests in. Dolores led Mateo to the workshop and showed him the table where they could put the bags. Grandfather went to the bathroom to freshen up a bit, and when he returned, Dolores excitedly introduced him and Senor Amato to each other. Pleased to meet you, young man, the old man said warmly. Likewise, colleague, Mateo responded. They shook hands, and Grandfather Aurelio began to show Mateo his works and tell the story of their creation, while Dolores busied herself with refreshments. When the old man had shown everything in the workshop, the new friend sat down on the couch. Dolores placed drinks on the table, arranged pastries, cheese, and tartlets with various fillings on plates. Mateo spoke highly of the works he had seen in the workshop. Your sculptures and figurines are simply magical. The whole world must see them. Grandfather Aurelio smiled, his eyes gleaming with the joy every creator feels when praised for their work. The whole world. That's quite a leap, young man. All boundaries exist in our minds, Mateo wisely replied, sampling a chocolate pastry. Delicious. Senorita Dolores made an excellent choice. My granddaughter is very talented, confirmed Grandfather Aurelio. She breathed new life into my work. Dolores smiled shyly. I just love working with paints, she simply said. And apparently, paints love working with you, joked Mateo. Everyone laughed. You have a great future ahead, added Senor Amato. Grandfather Aurelio took a sip of juice and nodded contentedly. I've been telling her that since she was a child. As he said these words, Grandfather Aurelio started coughing heavily. Mateo glanced at Dolores. I think it's time for us to. You need to rest, he tactfully suggested. Yes, Grandfather, you should lie down, Dolores got up. I'll tidy up here. Grandfather Aurelio nodded gratefully. He indeed felt weak. He got up and was about to shake Mateo's hand when Mateo suddenly jumped to his feet, as if a thought had just struck him. Before you go, I'd like to offer you something. In 2 weeks, there will be a major city art exhibition at our university's cultural center. Would you like to participate? Grandfather Aurelio and Dolores exchanged excited glances. Why not? It's a wonderful opportunity, emotionally responded Grandfather Aurelio. I've never been offered such a thing before. That's fantastic. Dolores couldn't contain her excitement. Senor Amato, thank you so much for this chance. She hugged Grandfather Aurelio and escorted him to his room. Grandfather, I'll come again tomorrow and stay for the weekend. The old man just nodded. He had no strength left after all the pleasant excitement of the evening. Dolores let him rest and returned to the workshop, where she found Mateo already starting to clear the table. No, let me do it myself, protested the girl. It's no trouble at all, replied Mateo. They quickly cleaned up and left the house. I hope Grandfather Aurelio gets better soon, Dolores said hopefully as she got into Mateo's car. Is he very dear to you? Senor Amato asked understandingly. My grandfather is the only close person I have in the whole world. He has given me as much love as he could. The girl fell silent for a long time. Mateo understood that she didn't want to talk right now and turned on some quiet, pleasant music. They listened to beautiful songs for the rest of the way. Mateo dropped Dolores off at the dormitory and thanked her for the wonderful evening. I felt very cozy and warm in your grandfather's workshop. I'm sure your joint works will be highly appreciated at the exhibition. They are worth much more than you think. Dolores raised her eyebrows in astonishment, but she couldn't doubt the truth of the young sculptor's words. From that evening on, she began to eagerly anticipate the exhibition. During the next visit, Grandfather Aurelio did not get any better. He lay all day and was unable to start working. Every weekend, Dolores painted finished figurines and took care of her grandfather Aurelio. It was hard for her to part with him, but the next day she had to attend lectures. Go, dear, said Grandfather Aurelio. Don't skip classes. I'll be fine. If I need help, I'll call Jimena. After all, she's still my daughter. Dolores nodded. Grandfather Aurelio brought a large bag from which he moved from the village. Embroidered on it was a large golden oak tree. Put all the works here that will participate in the exhibition and take them with you. Dolores was surprised. But the exhibition is still 2 weeks away. I can take them later. But Grandfather Aurelio insisted. It's better not to postpone until tomorrow what can be done today, he remarked. Dolores obeyed and selected their best joint works for the exhibition. Take care of yourself, Grandpa, she said as a parting word. Grandfather Aurelio escorted her to the door, hugged her tightly, and kissed her on the forehead. And you, dear. Remember, I love you very much. For some reason, Dolores's heart tightened at these words. She waved to Grandfather Aurelio, took the bag, and left. The old man waved to his granddaughter for a long time, standing on the doorstep of the house. The next day, Dolores took the bag with her grandfather's figurines to her lectures. During the break, she went to the department where Mateo worked and handed him the bag. Here are Grandpa's best works. We decided that they would participate in the exhibition. Great. I'll take them to the cultural center, where preparations are already in full swing. I assure you, all the figurines will be safe and sound. I'll personally take care of it. Dolores thanked Mateo and went to the next class. It was an ordinary day of study, and Dolores didn't even suspect that it would become the saddest day of her life. When she got home, her mobile phone rang. Her aunt's name appeared on the display. Dolores's heart pounded hard. Jimena never called her, and why would she? There could only be one reason. Something had happened to Grandfather Aurelio. Dolores hastily picked up the receiver, hearing sobs on the other end. Aunt, what happened? Is Grandfather Aurelio worse? Jimena didn't answer right away. She couldn't calm down. Grandfather Aurelio is no longer with us, she finally uttered. Dolores dropped the phone to the floor. She couldn't believe what she had heard. The closest person in her life was gone. Dolores staggered. Her friend Elena entered the room. "What's wrong, honey? You look so pale," she worried. At that moment, Dolores felt dizzy, her eyes darkening from the unbearable suffering she was experiencing. Elena helped her to the bed and brought water. "Grandpa passed away," Dolores whispered, taking a sip. It seemed to her that her voice belonged to someone else. Elena let out a sympathetic cry and hugged her friend tightly. "My poor girl," she whispered, knowing how much Dolores loved her grandfather. They sat embracing for a long time, then Elena suggested that Dolores lie down. The girl didn't think she could fall asleep, but sleep almost instantly enveloped her with its weightless web, and she sank into it like into soft fluff. Dolores dreamed that she was little again and helping Grandfather Aurelio in his workshop. "Grandpa, you'll never leave me, right?" Dolores asked. "No, I promise," the old man replied seriously. "I'll always be by your side, even when I'm gone." Late at night, Dolores woke up in tears. She already missed her grandfather terribly. Getting up, she drank some water and fell asleep again. This time she dreamed that she and Grandfather Aurelio were walking in the park and feeding the fish in the pond. In the morning, Dolores felt shattered. She didn't go to university and slept all day. In the afternoon, Aunt Jimena sent a message with the date of the funeral and the address where it would take place, and in the evening, someone called her from an unknown number. Dolores reluctantly picked up the phone. She didn't want to talk to anyone. "Señorita Dolores," she heard a familiar voice. "Yes, it's me," the girl replied. "You missed my lecture." Only now did Dolores realize it was Mateo Amato. "I decided to find out what happened," the young man continued. "You used to attend all the classes. Are you sick?" If only, Dolores thought bitterly. She gathered all her strength, but even then her voice sounded very weak. "My grandfather passed away." There was a pause. Mateo didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry for your loss." He finally whispered and added, "If you need my help, don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Senor Amato," Dolores replied quietly. "I won't come to the lecture tomorrow either. I need to go to the funeral." "I can take you there if you don't mind," Mateo said. Dolores bit her lip. She really needed someone's support, but how could she accept it from a teacher? "What about your lecture?" Dolores asked. "I'll reschedule it," Amato said decisively. Dolores had no more strength to resist. "Okay. We need to leave at 8. "I'll be at the dormitory at 5 to 8, Mateo replied. With that, they said goodbye. The funeral was very modest. Besides Xavier and Dolores' family, there was another old friend of their grandfather's who specially came from the village to bid farewell to Aurelio. Dolores couldn't hold back her tears. Mateo gently embraced her shoulders, trying to support her in some way. Aunt Jimena and cousins looked at the young couple with surprise, but fortunately, no one said anything. Dolores couldn't bear to hear cutting remarks from the family she had to grow up in. However, as Dolores was getting into the car with Mateo, Aunt Jimena approached them. "Dolores, I want to ask you something," she said arrogantly. "Yes, Aunt," Dolores replied. "Yesterday, I was cleaning Father's workshop and noticed that his favorite pieces were missing. Do you happen to know where they could have gone? I've checked all the cabinets, they're nowhere to be found." There was clear irritation in Aunt Jimena's voice. "Why do you need them?" asked the surprised Dolores. "I thought they could be sold at the market," Jimena replied directly. "You understand, there were a lot of expenses for the funeral and all." Dolores was about to respond when Mateo intervened in the conversation. "Listen, that's not acceptable. These pieces have high artistic value, and you just want to take them to the market," he protested. Aunt Jimena shot him a furious glance. "And who are you to decide what I should do?" "I'm a university professor," Senor Amato replied with dignity. "And I know a thing or two about such matters." "So you contacted a professor, Dolores?" Jimena turned to the girl. I never thought you were capable of such a thing. I always raised you to be modest and decent." Dolores blushed and felt like disappearing. She was already feeling very bad, and now this unpleasant conversation. She was afraid that after Auntie Minna's words, Mateo would stop talking to her. She was about to start justifying herself, but Senor Amato didn't allow her to do so. "It's none of your concern," he cut in. "If you've said everything you wanted, then please excuse us to the car." Auntie Minna hesitated for a moment, but that moment was enough for Mateo to lead the bewildered Dolores away, open the door for her, and seat her inside. As he walked around the car, he noticed Auntie Minna giving him a furious look. "She's a thief," she suddenly exclaimed. "I'll sue her for stealing Father's statues." Mateo stopped. This is the joint work of grandfather and granddaughter. All their creations now belong to Dolores, and you'll have to accept that. With these words, he got into the car and drove off, leaving Auntie Minna standing by the roadside with her mouth open in outrage. Mateo and Dolores remained silent for a long time. This time, Mateo didn't turn on the music. Apparently, he wanted to talk about what had happened. "Did this woman raise you instead of your mother?" he cautiously asked at last. Dolores bit her lip and nodded silently. "Now I understand why you considered your grandfather the only close person. This woman." Mateo didn't continue, just wrinkled his nose in disgust. "I feel so embarrassed for my aunt," Dolores whispered. "For what she said about us." Mateo briefly took his eyes off the road and looked at Dolores. "Perhaps it looked like that from the outside. But my intentions are pure. I never thought of anything like that. Though, undoubtedly, I find you attractive." Dolores flared up. "Oh no, don't think I often court my students. Actually, this is the first time for me. I liked you from the first sight. Your fragility and graceful features. When I first saw you, I wanted to take care of you, protect you from the whole world." Dolores couldn't believe what she was hearing. Did she evoke such feelings in Senor Amato? "But if it's uncomfortable for you to hear all this, I won't say it. I'll never cross the line and put you in an awkward position. After all, I'm a teacher and you're my student. But won't it always be like this? Dolores, what do you think? Do I have a chance?" Dolores was so astonished she didn't know what to say. "You also appeal to me, Senor Amato, but my grandfather said I should focus on studying first." Mateo glanced at Dolores again. "Yes, I understand, and I won't insist. We can be friends." Dolores nodded. It would be better for everyone. Their relationship would be too compromising. "I'm so sorry my grandfather didn't live to see the exhibition," Dolores sighed, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Me too," echoed Mateo. "He was a wonderful man with golden hands. What a pity I didn't get to know him earlier." Dolores sobbed. They didn't utter another word. 2 weeks later, an exhibition took place. The works of Grandfather Aurelio and Dolores greatly impressed the visitors and cultural figures, earning them an honorary certificate. Additionally, a gray-haired man approached Dolores and inquired about her inspiration for creativity. She marveled at his foreign accent and replied that the muse comes to her as soon as she picks up a brush and paint. "Oh, that's wonderful," the man chuckled. Then he slightly bowed and handed her a business card. Alessandro Ricci proclaimed the beautiful golden letters. "Sculptor." "Do you also work in sculpture?" the girl asked. Alessandro nodded. "Yes, and I've been quite successful at it. I have my own school in Italy. Every year we hold our own exhibition, attended by professionals from all over the world. Perhaps you'd be interested in participating?" Dolores couldn't believe her ears. She was being invited to an exhibition in Italy? When, she dared to ask. "Next week already. You'll have just enough time to pack your items and gather your suitcase," the Italian said cheerfully. "We'll cover your travel and accommodation expenses." Dolores had no choice but to smile in response. "Of course, I agree. By the way, We've also invited a professor from your university, Senor Amato. Do you know him? Dolores nodded joyfully. So Mateo would be there too. Magical. After the conversation with Alessandro, Dolores found the young sculptor and shared the grand news with him. He was very happy for her. I never doubted your talent, he exclaimed, barely restraining himself from hugging her. Mateo and Dolores spent 3 wonderful days in Italy. It was Dolores' first ever trip, and she enjoyed everything immensely. They managed to visit an art gallery, a museum, and indulge in amazing Italian cuisine. When they returned from Italy, Dolores learned a terrible thing from the television news. The Xavier family home, where she grew up and where grandfather Aurelio's workshop was located, had burned down completely. It was the biggest fire in the city's history. The report showed Aunt Jimena, who had lost everything. She never trusted banks and kept all her money at home. Moreover, the house itself was uninsured. Jimena's adult sons didn't work, accustomed to the fact that mom would always feed them, so the family was left with no means of survival. One of their friends donated their old van to them. It was parked next to the garbage bins, and the family now slept there. Compassionate neighbors shared clothes and blankets with them, brought food. The older brothers urgently started looking for work, but they weren't very lucky yet. The family was in dire straits. We rummaged through the trash bins every day in search of good things, the unfortunate Aunt Jimena admitted. Disturbed by the news, Dolores immediately called and told Mateo everything. He shrugged and stated that she couldn't help in any way. But you live on a scholarship yourself, he reasoned. But I have Grandpa's statues. If I sell them and give the money to Aunt, she can buy a new house and improve the family's situation. The girl objected. Mateo looked at her with amazement. Are you willing to sacrifice the most precious thing for these people? You said yourself that they never valued you for anything. Dolores nodded but couldn't calm down. They're still my family, she said quietly. Mateo ran his hand through his hair. Of course, it's entirely up to you. And Dolores decided. She kept her grandfather's favorite work for herself, a mythical Pegasus with rainbow wings, the painting of which she was particularly proud of. She took the rest of the items to a collector recommended by Mateo, who paid a high price for her grandfather's exclusive work. Dolores placed the money in her grandfather's bag and left a note inside. Hope these funds help you. Early in the morning, Dolores arrived at the place where the Xavier family's house used to be and stood by the fence for a while. Then she noticed a van where Aunt Jimena now lived. Not wanting to meet anyone from the Xavier family personally and remembering their words about digging through dumpsters, she placed the bag near the trash bin. Then she knocked loudly on the van door and quickly walked away down the street. She didn't hear the van door open, and Aunt Jimena appeared at the threshold. Not seeing anyone, she was about to close the door when she noticed a bag with an embroidered golden oak tree next to the trash bin. Jimena approached and picked up the bag. This is Dad's bag, she said aloud. But how did it end up here? Jimena placed the bag on the ground, unzipped it, and gasped in amazement, covering her mouth with her hand. Where did this money come from? Echoed in her mind. She noticed the note and, after reading it, realized that Dolores had been here. Aunt Jimena took the bag, went into the van, and sat on an old chair. She placed the bag at her feet and stared at the banknotes for a long time. So, Dolores sold Dad's figurines and gave the money to them. But why? Did she regret it? And this after calling her a thief? Aunt Jimena shook her head in bewilderment. And how could I have acted like this? The girl has a heart of gold. She whispered quietly so as not to wake the family. Unexpectedly, tears streamed down the woman's cheeks, and her own hardened heart softened a bit. Dolores continued attending lectures, but she missed working in the workshop she had been accustomed to since childhood. So, Dolores asked Mateo for permission to come to his workshop when the senior courses were held there. He gladly granted her this permission. Dolores had the opportunity to continue her grandfather Aurelio's work. However, she was not as skilled a sculptor and soon switched to painting. Her paintings gained attention. She was invited to exhibitions. Soon, she became known throughout the city. The first academic year was swiftly coming to an end. Dolores was very busy. All her time was spent preparing for exams and tests. Finally, all that was behind her, and she was looking forward to the holidays. Her friend Elena suggested she go to the seaside where her grandmother lived, and Dolores agreed happily. A few days before her departure, Mateo called her to meet. "I have news for you," he said mysteriously. They met in the park and sat on a bench near the fountain. "So what did you want to tell me?" asked Dolores. She was wearing the same pink dress that her grandfather had given her. Mateo admired the girl. The evening was warm. The fountain murmured gently, as if whispering words of love. Stars lit up one by one in the sky. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers, mixed with Dolores's perfume. Mateo leaned towards the girl and ran his hand through her hair. "I've decided to quit the university," he said. "Next year, you'll have a new sculpture teacher." "Really?" Dolores was disappointed. She couldn't imagine her life without Mateo Amato. "Very much so," nodded the young man. "I've decided to dedicate all my time to creativity. I have the opportunity to earn quite well from it, so why not?" Dolores lowered her head. She didn't want to lose another close person, but she knew that life doesn't always go the way you want. "So, we won't see each other anymore?" she asked. "Yes, I won't be your teacher anymore," smiled Mateo, then added after a pause, "but I really want to be your boyfriend. If you don't mind." Surprised, Dolores didn't immediately realize what she heard, then she laughed joyfully. "Hope you're not quitting because of me," she clarified. Mateo grinned mischievously and leaned a bit closer. "Exactly for that reason," he confessed. Having said that, Mateo gently touched Dolores's lips, and she responded to his kiss. Somewhere, a street musician played a beautiful melody on the violin, and above the lovers' heads, the golden stars shone even brighter. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.